Hi, so I'm Roger Hallam. I am a organic farmer. I do research on radical campaigning and how to make it successful. We're here at the Greenpeace headquarters in the UK. I'm here with my colleague Lart and good friend of 30 years. And we've spent several decades trying to wake the world up to what's going wrong in it, not least the climate change emergency. And here we are in 2019. The British government has finally, or British Parliament to be more precise, the sovereign body of the UK, has declared that there is in fact a climate emergency, and we're here to go and see the chief executive of Greenpeace to suggest that they radically transform their organisation so it's fit for purpose for the revolutionary social, political and economic changes that are about to happen. So we're just going to have a little chat about what we're going to do. So my suggestion, or what we've already talked about, is we're going to go in to see John Soven. No, very good with surnames. Soven. You've got your tie on, so that shows that we've got some gravitas.
And respect.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I didn't quite manage that this morning. I've only worn a tie twice in 30 years, and both of those were in the last 7 days. So I think I'm doing quite well in terms of culture change. And we're going to ask to speak to John. John's already kindly agreed to see us, and we have got a list of proposals to make to him. We're going to ask him from a transparency point of view to have this filmed, and then obviously the general public and Greenpeace members and the environmental movement can sort of see what are some of the major crises, as we see it, in the environmental movement that are now prevalent due to this exponentially increasing existential crisis.
It's basically asking Greenpeace to step up to play their full part in responding to the emergency. It being an emergency, things have shifted. Things aren't how they were 30 years ago when we were having these conversations with Greenpeace. So it's coming from a place of respect, mutual, appreciation, hopefully. Certainly on our part, appreciation of the role Greenpeace has played and has attempted to play, but very much saying we all need to recognise what we've been trying for the last 30 years hasn't worked. We need to try things differently. So this is our suggestion of how that might look.
Yeah, so we've got a number of specific things. It's all very well sort of using rhetoric and what have you, but the name of the game in this world, as far as I'm concerned anyway, is specific proposals. So we've got a few specific proposals. First of all, as I'm sure many people are aware, Greenpeace started off as very much a bottom-up activist participatory organisation, and over the decades, particularly in the 1990s, it decided to corporatise itself and use a sort of NGO structure. So our argument is, in the context of a climate emergency, this needs to change. We need to decorporatise the NGO sector. What does this mean? Well, one of the main things it means is that we need to reduce the pay differentials. So our suggestion is that the difference between the highest and lowest paid worker in Greenpeace and other NGOs is not more than 1 to 3. So if the lowest paid worker is on 20,000 a year, then the highest paid person, like the chief executive or whatever people want to call them, is on 60,000. So that leads us on to the second point, which is to make institutional changes so that both staff and members can directly influence policy, either through direct representation or through some form of random selection, so we can ensure transparent accountability and democracy within Greenpeace. So we want to go back to a popular participatory form where people feel like they can act and they're part of the organisation, have a say in the organisation. So that leads us on to really the big structural point here, which is if there's a climate emergency, and basically that means the death of the young people around the world in the next generation or so nothing could be more serious. Greenpeace needs to reconnect with its original policies and orientation, and that means going into an existential, non-violent struggle with the genocidal UK political regime. That is a massive change. but it's now necessary if we're serious about acting upon the climate emergency. Greenpeace, in its publicity in the last few weeks, is saying we need a climate emergency and we need to act upon it. Well, if Greenpeace is real about it, then they need to go into existential non-violent struggle with the British state. What does this mean specifically? Okay, so our suggestion is the current director, John
Sovan.
Steps down from his role of chief executive and is replaced with someone else who will lead the organisation in direct action. Now that means getting arrested, going to prison, going on hunger strike. So in other words, we need a complete change in how leadership is looked upon in NGOs. The people at the top of the NGOs, and particularly in Greenpeace, of course, need to lead from the front. And that means engaging in sacrifices to have credibility with the younger generation, who are now on a course to starve from death in the next 10 or 20 years, if we are to believe the science. Secondly, the new director and the leading staff of Greenpeace need to do an extensive national tour, speaking face-to-face to audiences up and down the country, to tell them that basically the present political and economic system is now no longer fit for purpose. And people should engage in mass civil disobedience along with other movements and networks to bring down the government and replace it with a national citizens' assembly of ordinary people who will be informed by the science and through a deliberative process decide how the British people want to respond to this crisis. And lastly, Greenpeace needs to initiate with other NGOs and similar environmental networks and organisations open spaces around the country where people can share their grief about the impending catastrophe and then jointly resolve to transform the environmental movement so it's fit for purpose in this crisis.
Greenpeace is on board with the emergency. It's been saying it's an emergency for more than a decade, to its credit, but it's no longer okay to point your finger at the government and say it's emergency, you've got to do X, Y and Z. We have to step up, all of us, and tell the truth and act as if it's real ourselves, and then from that place demand that of the government. So that's what we're saying to Greenpeace. To be credible in this emergency, you need to make those changes, you need to step up as well. And that's what we're inviting them to do.
And the last point is we've got this little letter here that we're going to give to Greenpeace staff so they can read it. And then we're actually inviting people to a Heathrow pause, which is a picnic and drone session next Wednesday in a field near Heathrow. So we're actually asking Heathrow to close down for the day so that Londoners can think about what's happening to the next generation. So we're walking our talk, as it were. This could obviously have major legal implications, and myself and Larch will be taking part in that event next Wednesday. And in so much as anyone sees it before then you can get in touch with the climate and ecological emergency candidates and come and join us. So, yes, interesting times.
We've got about 20 people already interested in joining us for the drone session and another sort of 50 thinking of coming to the picnic. So it's going to be a mass participation event. Quite a different, again, it's like we all have to step up, those of us as we're able in this time. We can stop the third runway this summer if enough people step up in the right kind of way.
And nothing would help more if the chief executive of Greenpeace left his desk and come and have a picnic with us.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Seems a reasonable proposition to me.
Yeah. So let's see what he says.
Okay, let's do it.
I mean, I'm happy to stay as long, but if you want me to leave, tell me.
Yeah, I'll let you know, yeah.
We've got a meeting with John.
Yeah, cool. I need to call up. If you guys want to sign in.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, that's what I figured.
Could I leave these for yourself and any staff that are interested?
Yeah,
It's a letter
that's
to
fine.
Greenpeace.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fine.
It's a nice building, isn't it? Nice place to work. Hello there.
Oh, hi, mate. How are you?
Very good, thanks. You, John?
Have we met?
Sorry? We have.
Have we?
I don't know, I don't think so. I'm Larch.
Oh, Larch, hi. Are you? I think I met you on a road protest. Involved in road protest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you there in, what, 94?
Twyford?
No, it was an M65.
Or Newbury?
It was an M65.
Oh, we did the M65, yeah, we did an action.
Rainbow Digger action.
That's right.
Yeah.
With Peter Melchett.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm very well, Roger. How are you doing?
Well, you know, busy.
You've got better things to do than stand for the European Parliament?
Apparently not.
Apparently not. Well, that was a rather bourgeois institution, isn't it? Centre of neoliberal capitalism and all the rest of it.
Well, media attention, public attention, politicians' attention goes to the elections, so that's...
We're not envisaging getting elected.
Use that to get the attention on the climate crisis, that's fine.
So, yeah, you want to discuss the demands.
We're not
Who are you
envisaging.
here kind of representing?
Well, I was just going to put a little bit of context into it, just to make that clear. So obviously the first thing to make clear is although both of us are in Extinction Rebellion, as you well know, what we're doing have been doing for 2 weeks, is stepping back from Extinction Rebellion in order to stand as independent candidates in the EU election, as under a climate and ecological emergency independent ticket, as it were. Not primarily to try and win, but to use the election as a way of continuing to highlight the importance of the climate emergency. And as Lodge has explained, we're sort of publicly saying we don't want people to vote for the 6 candidates that are supporting us, or the 6 candidates that don't want to be elected, as it were. We're just there to make our point, as you might say. But we are requesting that people do want to vote for a climate emergency candidate, then they vote for the 19-year-old candidate, Days. That's right. And we will be going to Heathrow. I'll come to that at the end of our conversation on Wednesday. And invite you and Greenpeace along to that if you would like to come. So one of 7 or 8 different ports of call is Greenpeace, and we're coming because we're concerned that the NGO sector generally and specifically Greenpeace aren't responding effectively to the climate change emergency situation. So
But which organisation are you? Sorry, just
Climate and Ecological Emergency Independent Candidates.
that's who you represent.
We're here today.
Well, to be technically correct, we're not representing anyone because we are independent.
Yes,
so
it's not a political party.
myself as Roger Hallam is standing as an independent, and I'm coming to you as an independent climate and ecological emergency candidate in the election to speak to you.
Okay.
And so is
doing the
Lodge.
same.
But you're not. But have you
Okay.
left Extinction Rebellion?
No, I mean what was agreed was that we would stand back during the period that we were standing as candidates, in as much as Extinction Rebellion is not a party political organisation, as you well know. And
But you haven't left it.
No, not at all.
No,
we're still working in the background. We just aren't doing public-facing stuff with XR. We've sort of stepped back from our coordination.
That's until
roles.
Thursday, and then we'll be returning
Yeah.
to our posts, as you might say, on Thursday, after Thursday.
So you're going to go back to Extinction Rebellion on Thursday.
That's the plan. Yeah. So, do you want to say a little bit about the first? Yeah, Lodge is going to do a little bit, and I'm going to do a little bit. So,
Have you seen this letter?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have. Great. Yeah. So the first point was, then you'll be familiar with them, is about the first sort of 2 really relate to well, I guess it's all about a decorporatisation agenda. So it's like making Greenpeace more like a kind of grassroots organisation than less like a company. So the first one is reducing the pay differential. So this is the idea of something along the lines of a 1 to 3 pay differential.
Do you know what our pay differential is between
No, actually.
my pay and the lowest paid person here?
No.
Shouldn't you have asked or found that out?
Yeah.
Huh?
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, 2.8.
2.8.
Yeah. We have a very flat pay structure here, and I haven't had a pay rise for, I don't know, 5-10 years. So, eventually everyone will be paid more than me. So it's, I think you're barking up the wrong tree here. We're not like if you went to other NGOs and you found people being paid 90, 100, 120, 150,000 pounds or whatever. That's not the case here. you want to know my salary, it's on the website. Probably the only NGO that publishes their CEO salary on the website. But I am an activist, I have been all my life. This idea that we're some big nasty corporation that gets thrown around by Roger is not true. We are made up of activists, and a lot of your friends even some of your friends who were with you on road protests in the M65 work here. So
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
you know very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we are an activist organisation, that is our heart.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first thing is, in terms of Greenpeace UK, we're a global organisation. I think that's also, something that we did discuss with Roger last time he came in here, is that we're not a UK organisation, we're a global organisation. So our commitment is to a global programme. That's why we're campaigning in Indonesia, Brazil, why we've got a big oceans campaign at the moment going, through from the Arctic to the Antarctic, covering much of Latin America, Africa and so on, is that that's where we operate, on the high seas, in the global ecosystems, confronting governments globally, corporations globally. So we're different in the sense that, say if you take something like Friends of the Earth, it's a more domestic organisation, although it's got an international federation, its work is domestic, whereas about 80% of our work is global. And that's not our decision. We are a global organisation, that's decided by the global organisation that we have. That's how we operate, it's who we are. So I kind of think it's not in our power to suddenly say we're going to be a domestic UK organisation. Our licence would be removed. So it's.
You could advocate for, could you not, that the UK's decision. Two things. One would be that the UK focused campaigns, national campaigns, domestic as you call them, are shaped by members and staff within the UK.
Well, who do you think shapes our programme at the moment?
I imagine it's staff, presumably the more senior staff.
No, it's done by staff, by activists, by volunteers. We have consultations with supporters, and that's done at quite a broad global level.
So within the UK, what's the mechanism for ordinary members to have an input in policies? So,
I don't know. What's the objective here? With that
demand, it's to make it transparent, and so that everyone feels ownership of Greenpeace.
Well,
everyone that's a member feels like, it's not like. Just finish. Just to explain the difference between an organisation that's sort of asking for members to donate and maybe sign a petition versus get more involved. For example, specifically we're here to focus on the ecological and climate emergency. So what we're seeking is that all of us working in this area are encouraging people to take direct action and take personal responsibility themselves and get as engaged as we can. And the sort of danger I see, just to be really direct, is that if someone's a member of Greenpeace, the messaging they could get is that they get an email from Greenpeace, as the one you sent out recently about the climate emergency, and they sort of take from that the message that actually the emergency is being achieved by this petition, and so we need to sign this petition and we need to donate. We need to donate to Greenpeace to get that furthered. Whereas actually, the emergency has been declared by the UK government quite clearly because of the direct action people have been taking.
Yeah.
And that Greenpeace has got all of these members that care about this issue, and if they were taking direct action, we would get so much more progress, so much more quickly.
Sure, and that's the journey, isn't it? So we appeal to everybody to get more involved and engage with activism. We run big training sessions all the time on non-violent direct action for our supporters. We would love it if everybody got involved in direct action, and increasingly people are, and that's fantastic. But I can't dictate what people can do. I can only give them the opportunity to do that, and it's their personal decision as to whether they do that or not. But obviously, there is a journey that you go through in terms of, well, there'll be, maybe 60% of the population will see climate change as an issue that something should be done about it, and you'll get down to 3% who are prepared to get arrested for it or something. So, it's not that you want to exclude people or deny people an opportunity to do something, whatever it is, wherever they are. But it will always be a smaller number of people that are prepared to go to the nth degree in relation to this.
So I would just encourage you to question that continuously whilst reviewing what's happening in the UK right now in the real world, because that's absolutely true if we look at the last 30 years. But we're in a different context now. That's why we've come to meet you. It's not to try and make you wrong at all. It's just to say, look, we're all in this. We're all in this together. It's a different context now. What can we do about that together?
Sure. Which is all valid, and of course it's important that you push us and probe and challenge us on these issues, as it is that we do it ourselves. And certainly we want to engage more people in taking direct action. That is absolutely vital, that people do that, and that we give people the opportunity to do that. And I think that we do put a lot of effort into that. We should do more, and we will do more. And I agree with you, the climate is changing. The climate in terms of people's perception is changing, and that's a good thing. And I think that, I think one of the issues, though, that I would come back on you with is that, like, when you say, everything that anybody's done for the last 30 years is a complete waste of time, we're only here today because of what everybody has done for the last 30 years, because we do have the organisations, the awareness, the science, the communication, and so on and so forth. It doesn't just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
There are lots of things as to why, tipping points are reached at certain periods of time and not at other periods of time. But we're certainly building up, and this issue is getting more profile, and people are prepared to take more action. And as a consequence of that, you've got to change and adapt to that situation.
I certainly have never said and wouldn't say that everything we've done in the last 30 years is a complete waste of time. So that's, I understand
Roger,
how it could feel
Roger
like that.
Does say that.
And
I think it's demeaning to everybody, including to himself, because he's also been an activist. You've been an activist. I've been an activist. There's no point in just saying we just wasted our lives. And if you look at a lot of the people who were part of that rebellion, and I was there many times during the course of those 2 weeks. I didn't get arrested because I had a really bad chest infection. I was quite ill, but I still went down. But there were many people there who I knew from the peace movement where I used to work, from the roads protest movement. There were many people who had learned skills, who got experience, who were there over the course of those 2 weeks. So I wouldn't diss all of these people. These people have dedicated their lives to protect the environment, for social justice, for human rights, and so on and so forth. So,
I agree with you on that.
Why not involve and engage with these people rather than just attack them? I don't understand why you do that.
As I said, we haven't come here to make you wrong. We're not here to attack you or anyone else, and that's not what we're trying to do with any of that.
But I've read Roger's writings, I've read his manifesto, and he goes on about how NGOs are a waste of space, have been useless for the last 30 years, and so on and so forth.
Sometimes what Roger does is distill try and distill the essence, and so that there is I think there's a balance to be had. We're going, yes, we've done all this work, all of the three of us around this table, and many others over the last 30 years.
Many tens of thousands of people.
Organisations and individuals have done this work, yes, and it's been valuable work, it's been important work. We've got a lot of respect for it, and there's a clear metric here, which is that emissions have gone up. They've not only gone up, but most of the emissions that humanity has emitted have happened on our watch in the last 25 years.
I accept that.
Yeah, so
I accept
we
that.
have to bring that into the room. We have to be really explicit about that.
Absolutely, I accept that, and I talked to Roger about that the last time that we met, that we are facing a crisis, both in terms of emissions going up and in terms of extinction, in terms of losing species. So, of course, this is a monumental challenge for the entire global community in terms of how we respond to this crisis. And I suppose that, and Greenpeace being a global organisation, has to think about that in the context of how we can respond not just at the domestic level, but how we can respond at a global level.
Sure, absolutely. And what we know we have to try things differently. Try things out that we haven't tried before. For the last period that we've been doing this stuff, one of my little sort of litmus tests has been, when I've had doubts about whether we should try something out, do something, and there's been always been pushback about everything we've done. I've looked at have we done it before? If we haven't tried it before, I know if we have to try things differently, we have to take risks, because the biggest risk is that we don't get emissions coming down, we don't stop the heat species decline, and we carry on over the cliff. That's the biggest risk that we all face. So we have to take risks individually and collectively.
Absolutely.
So that's a difficult thing for someone like you in your position, because you've got responsibilities not just for yourself but for the whole organisation. And I see that. But
we are a direct action organisation. Activism is at our heart. It's what we do. So we take risks. And prepared to take risks, and I wouldn't set myself apart from anybody else who's engaged in direct action. I think that is absolutely core to who we are and what we do.
Great. So just a specific example then, with that email that you sent around after the vote for Parliament, nowhere in there, a friend, well, I've got lots of friends who are members of Greenpeace, as you can imagine, so one of them showed me it, and the impression you would get as a member of Greenpeace from reading that is that the reason the emergency, and it didn't say this, but that was the impression you would get as a reasonable person reading that email, was the reason the government had declared the emergency was because of the petition, and the call to action that was asked in that particular, two things that people were invited to do based on that letter, was to sign the petition if they're not, or share it if they're not done so, and to donate to Greenpeace. There was no, at any point in that email, an acknowledgement that this shift in context has come about through the government declaring an emergency because of this mass programme of civil disobedience and 1,000 more people getting arrested and tens of thousands getting involved in some other way around the country. Hi mate, finally we get to meet. I thought I might see you if I came in here.
Give me a shout after you've...
Yeah, great. We've been trying to meet together around this issue for a while. So a practical example is in that email, and in all of your messaging, there could be, in addition to what you're already asking of people, an acknowledgement of these other movements that are also working in this area, and the invitation for people to take direct action themselves. And everyone's on this journey, as you say. That's and to be explicit about that. At the moment, I think there's a tendency for people who are subscribers to Greenpeace to be donating, and that's their way of contributing. And I don't see that as a way of bringing people on that journey. I think you could be more proactive in getting people on that journey and laying it out for them, giving them steps to go from donating, supporting, to taking direct action.
And just to be clear, that is what we do and what we want to see happen. So we would like it if everybody came here or around the country came to do non-violent direct action training and got involved in direct action. And that is an offer that we make to everybody, and we do encourage people to do that. And we've trained thousands and thousands of people in direct action. So, that is absolutely what we want to see happen. But as I said before, it is a journey. It is a question of getting people engaged and involved and taking them on that journey. Ultimately, the end point being that you want to get thousands of people involved in taking direct action. That is absolutely vital, and that's absolutely what we want to see happen.
Okay, so it's not rocket science. We've been doing this for 150 years, getting people involved and taking direct action.
Yeah.
That's how women got the vote through the suffragettes. It's how the civil rights movement ended segregation in America, etc.
Yeah.
So, we've seen with the youth strikes, with Extinction Rebellion, that there are organisations stepping up and doing that. And I just think, yes, it's great that you've trained up all those people, and let's see how we can get them and others joining those processes, joining those existing structures or movements, or joining them within Greenpeace as part of that. I don't see that happening at the moment.
Well, I question that a bit because, probably most of the staff were on the Easter Rebellion. Lots of our activists and supporters were there. I met many Greenpeace supporters. Some of the groups were led by Greenpeace supporters that were taking part in the Easter Rebellion. So I think if you look at the participation of Greenpeace people in that action, actually it was over those 2 weeks actually quite high.
Okay, well, I guess that's great to hear. I'm really heartened to hear that. But it's news to me. I was I've been working full time with Extinction Rebellion since November, October, and I didn't know that. So, I think, for example, someone from 38 Degrees came in and did a secondment with us, and we had their working full. As you know, in this work, coordination and office backroom stuff is vital, and one or two or 5 or 10 people doing that kind of role goes a huge way and brings in thousands on the streets. So one person seconded from Greenpeace would have really helped, for example, or just to know that, so that you could be messaging it saying, yeah, we're on board with this, we're going on the streets, will you join us? You've got thousands of members that might have then also come on the streets. I'm sure some of them did.
Well, no, they didn't. If you read on our website, there are blogs. There was one blog written by
I just read it.
of staff whose parents came
Yes,
down
I've read it. It's beautiful. But again, I was coordinating the bridge, and I didn't know that. Would have been nice to have known that was happening. And
But just to say that we were very supportive, and I had a meeting actually here of supporters on Tuesday night, and lots of them were wearing XR badges and stickers and things like that. I don't think people make these big distinctions between Greenpeace and Extinction Rebellion. A lot belong to other, Christian peace organisations or anti-fracking organisations. I mean, I personally, I wouldn't get too hung up on it, because I think lots of people, if you said, who do you support, they'll wear an entire, like in the army when you've got a whole row of medals across your chest, they will have many little badges of all the things that they support and represent. I don't think people see it in such black and white terms, or even with this one or that one. I think people are kind of quite freely move, and quite happily participate in lots of things that other people are doing or organising, or even feel part of multiple organisations.
I agree, absolutely.
And
so
that's in a way how it should be. It's how it will work best.
So that's brilliant.
Because you don't really want to box people.
So then it should be no problem for Greenpeace, say, in the next iteration of a large-scale action where we're calling on everyone to join with us, and particularly in October, we're looking, in the autumn, probably, October, looking towards, getting a whole load of other organisations and movements involved and bringing their own flavour to it, to be putting that out, inviting members to join that.
Which is fine. We have to remember we had a very uncomfortable meeting with Roger before the Easter uprising, which was quite threatening, and we felt, this was a bit like the mafia turning up here. It wasn't a sort of a very friendly conversation of kind of two organisations having respect for each other and being able to talk about how they could cooperate and work together. It was a horrible meeting, and I think quite upsetting for a lot of people. And so it didn't get off to a good start.
Okay, I hear that, and I'm glad. Thank you for sharing that, and really appreciate that openness. That's really helpful. And Roger is one person. One of our mottos in Extinction Rebellion is "We're all crew." Not that I'm currently doing public work for XR, but so we're all equals, we're all volunteers. So one person, doesn't speak for the whole organisation. One person, is a vital part of this whole movement. But it's not just down to one person. So I think.
Look, we have met other people like Gail.
Yeah.
Where we've had much better interaction and better understanding and a bit more mutual respect. So.
And whatever's happened in the past, this is too big for us to get hung up on. Particular. We have to see through any. We have to have a solution-focused orientation.
I'm not hung up by it. Yeah. And as I said, we were very supportive of the Easter uprising. Most staff came here. We blogged about it. lots of supporters came, and so on and so forth. That wasn't a problem. It was more a problem of just having respect for each other and respect for each other's positions, and also just understanding a bit more about different organisations is, I think, also kind of really important. We are a global organisation. Most of our funding goes globally, not locally. That's our commitment to the global organisation. 80% of our programme work in terms of campaigning is for the global organisation. So there just has to be a little bit of understanding about that. And you might have one theory of change, I might have another. We can support each other and have solidarity with each other without treating it like the Bible, that this is the gospel according to Roger or whatever, and we all have to follow the way. I don't think that's going to be particularly helpful, because I don't think people are going to go along with that.
And are you open to making specific changes, like for example, the way an email is worded, or
Of course, and we will look at that, and we can learn from that. But I just think that the respect is kind of really important. And I think if you're going to go out and talk to other organisations, it's really important you understand who those organisations are. Because look, we're not a charity, we're a direct action organisation, so we're not limited by charitable laws or overseen by the Charity Commission. But if you go and talk to other organisations, they are charities. They are limited by charity law and what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do, and their trustees and their board will enforce that really strongly, whether the staff want to or not. So I think you also have to understand that
I've helped set up charities and
co-founded them. So you know what the limitations are. So there's no point in going to them and making demands of them, knowing full well that they can't meet those demands. It's that, like, I think that Extinction Rebellion is great because it is Extinction Rebellion. If it got involved in a load of other NGOs, it wouldn't be Extinction Rebellion. It would probably slow it down. It would probably stop you doing lots of things that you wanted to do and felt right to do. So I think you also yourself have to balance those things out in terms of, like, what does it give you and what does it take away from you? And that needs kind of thinking through kind of strategically, because one of the things about Extinction Rebellion, particularly in terms of the Easter Uprising, is you can pretty much do whatever you wanted. Some were pretty bonkers, like going and padlocking yourself to Jeremy Corbyn's front door, and other things were brilliantly innovative and creative, but it didn't really matter what it was or where it was. People could do whatever they wanted to do. That was the sort of great thing about it. But what you want to avoid is actually be getting into a situation where you're tying yourself down, trying to negotiate
absolutely,
and trying to get agreements with coalitions and all these things. Takes too long and restricts your freedom and your ability to do what you do best and who you are. So I just kind of think you need, in a way, you kind of need to think about that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we are thinking about that. We've got various people thinking about that in different ways, from different perspectives. So we've got action strategy team, political strategy team, movement strategy team, and circles that are part of them.
So not focus on XR so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good point.
And also, I mean, how I envisage this meeting with you is to communicate our views, and then you can respond to them. And so specifically
on well, just on finishing the membership thing, do you see any scope for we talked about the journey people go on, and I just think there's you could be more proactive in bringing people on that journey. I hear you say that you train thousands of people, but as a proportion of your membership and as a kind of the overall messaging I see that is that it's okay for people just to be, and of course everyone's on their journey and you can't specify where people go and at what speed or whatever, but there's lots of things we can do to bring people on that journey. Extinction Rebellion has demonstrated the ability to do that. The strikes have demonstrated the ability to do that. As I said, there's 150 years of experience of people going on that journey. It's not rocket science, it can be done.
Absolutely. And
so as if you had members actively helping be engaged. So you don't just donate. You take an active say in the policies, and you actively get involved in direct action. In campaigns, whatever level, up to the point of putting yourself in a arrestable position for those that are willing to do that. Do you see that could be a contribution that Greenpeace could make?
Yeah, I mean, I hope we are making a contribution. Can we make a bigger contribution? I hope so in the future, and maybe we are reaching a point, a tipping point where things are changing. So things will happen faster than maybe they had before, and sometimes those things are not exactly in your power as to when those points arrive. It's things that happen in the external environment about why something becomes more urgent or people become more conscious or aware. These, like you see, like say with the Arab Spring, why didn't it happen 5 years before, 10 years before, 15 years before, 20 years before? Why did it happen specifically in Tunisia? Somebody setting themselves alight, sparking something. You get to these points where something happens like that, and hopefully we're at one of those points now in terms of people's awareness and consciousness about climate change and biodiversity loss, which is going to spark a much bolder reaction in people than maybe has been the case before.
Absolutely, I would say we definitely are at that point, and we can be proactive agents in that.
Yeah. And also, this. But I would also come back. Just we are a global organisation. We, of course, we want to see this happen in the UK, but we want to see this happen globally.
Absolutely.
And there, if you're talking about, for example, climate change, this has to happen in China, in India, across Europe, North America. Where the big emitters are. We also need to see similar kinds of movements happen, and so we need global organisations to be able to do that, who are operating in all these different places in society.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
Roger, over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks for your comments, and I just want to set the scene a little bit for the next section, which is to say that our communication is obviously just a communication of a particular number of people with a particular view, so it's not necessarily reflecting other people's views, and certainly not everyone in Extinction Rebellion. So and the other thing to say, just if I could correct you, that it's not my personal intention to judge the people who have made contributions to the environmental movement over the last 30 years, and I've gone to some length to say that I personally respect the actions of those people. I'm simply wishing to point out that they've been catastrophically ineffective. But those are two separate points. People can believe and put a lot of themselves emotionally and politically into a social change project, and for it to be objectively a failure at the same time. So that's my orientation. Obviously, people may disagree with my judgment, but it has been a catastrophic failure. But obviously, I'd argue that a 60% increase in carbon emissions in 30 years can't be described as anything less than that. But I just want to put that on record. What is done in terms of people's pasts, and we're not here to judge people's past. We're not here to judge people anyway. What we're here to do, as I see it anyway, in my personal view, is to see what we're doing from this day onwards, given what's done is done. I'm not in the business of judging or naming people. What we're in the business of doing as candidates in this particular context is to make propositions about how we can fulfil our responsibilities in the next generation in a way that's sort of like effective. And obviously there's plenty of debate, and I'm putting forward my point of view, and no doubt you'll put your point of view, but we live in a democratic society where people can make propositions. Making a proposition does not necessarily mean you're trying to force people into a position. Obviously, with the proposition of doing civil disobedience with regard to Greenpeace, is, as you know, it's a no man's land between a coercion and persuasion, and there's a big debate about that, so we can talk about that at another point. But just to reiterate once again that in my personal orientation towards Greenpeace, I have greatest respect for the individuals concerned. However, I am of the opinion, as you know, that major structural change does need to take place, and that's why I'm here today. Okay, so in that context, the proposition we'd like to make to you as candidates is that while in the past great work has been done, obviously by the environmental movement, but we are where we are in a catastrophic emergency, which basically means the prospect of the death of the next generation, depending on your viewpoint, in the next decade or two, or certainly by the end of the century. So we are dealing with something that's completely different, we would argue, to what you might call extremely important but not existential environmental problems, though obviously they're all interrelated. So it's
Like
in that
what, sorry?
context. Well, for instance, like, saving particular species and dealing with plastic are all absolutely vital campaigns. But our argument is that
But we don't run save species campaigns.
Well, I wouldn't know whether you have or you haven't, but my understanding is you've done things on whales, for instance. But
That was back in the 70s. That was kind of quite.
well, I was looking at your rather impressive photo at the front of your
Yeah, but that
office.
photograph
So that's
was
historic, is it?
taken probably 20 or 30 years ago.
Well, maybe you should take it down and put a new one up. But anyway, yeah, that's neither here nor there. Okay, so it's in that context of making these propositions.
But you have got a
to-
plastics campaign at the moment, for example.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, there was
not to say that that's
there
wrong,
was an
it's just
interesting
context.
article in the Guardian the other day about how plastics
Yeah.
was central to the battle against
Yeah.
climate change,
Yeah.
and actually that's exactly where the fossil fuel industry is going. Is into particularly the oil corporations are going into petrochemicals to flood the world with new products, which. The thing at the moment is that the oceans are saving us when it comes to climate change because they're absorbing more than half our emissions. So if you choke the oceans with plastic, we're pretty screwed as well. So I think that the thing about climate, campaigning on climate change is quite a systemic issue where actually you can come at it from a number of different points. The question is, are you talking about climate change in terms of how you're coming at the issue? I think that's what's kind of really important. But I think that these things are interconnected. I mean, a lot of people say, for example, we should campaign on climate change, not species loss. And other people say, no, we should campaign on species loss, not climate change. And the thing is the two are interrelated to each other.
Well, this is why we're standing as climate and ecological emergency candidates, to bring the two together.
But exactly. So I kind of think that the important thing is not to silo these issues, and I think the important thing is actually to talk about it in a kind of holistic way, in the way they are interrelated. The points at which you come at them can vary depending on context, depending on country, depending on culture, depending on where people are at. Which, as a global organisation, we also need to look at. What we can do in this country, we can't do in China, for example. If you're in a one-party authoritarian dictatorship, your room for manoeuvre is more narrow.
Do you want to carry on?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to run through these three propositions. I think, is that right? Yeah. I've got them here. Right. So this is the context. That to prepare Greenpeace UK for an existential non-violent struggle with the genocidal UK political regime, the specific proposals one at a time, is the present director, yourself, steps down from the role of chief executive.
Would you like my job, Roger?
Shall I just finish it, if that's okay? And is replaced with a person who will lead the organisation in direct action, get arrested, go to prison and go on hunger strike. Leaders now have to lead from the front and engage in the sacrifices required to save our younger generation from an early death from starvation or worse.
But do you want that's what I'm saying, do you want my job? Would you like to do my job?
No, I wouldn't. But I'd like to know how you would respond to that proposition.
But do you know who would like to do my job? Have you got any ideas?
I have no idea, but I presume there are people who would lead the organisation from the front and engage in sacrificial action as a sign that they are personally and organisationally serious in entering into an existential non-violent struggle with the political regime we're in this country, given that the science points towards a genocidal event within a generation. That's what the science seems to support. and just to emphasise, everything that I'm saying to here is based upon the proposition that the science is correct and what the social and political implications of that are.
But so, I'm employed by the board, so you can write to the board, and they can make a decision in terms of finding a replacement for me.
Right.
What I would suggest that's the course of action that you should take.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say with regard to that?
Well, no, because it's a board decision, so I think you would need to ask the board to fire me and find a
Presumably
replacement.
you feel you're doing a good job.
Well,
personally.
I mean, I'm just an individual. It's like, as I said, we're not a particularly hierarchical organisation here. You just met Paul, who's an old colleague of yours, who's done many direct actions and is an activist. We are an organisation of activists here. You can replace me or whatever. That's assuming I'm, the king or queen that decides everything and does everything and leads everything and all the rest.
I suppose the proposition is that you've been on television several times, and to a certain extent you are the voice in the media of Greenpeace UK, and quite rightly so, arguably, because you're the executive. But the proposition in this point
actually,
is...
I would dispute that. I think that actually, that if you actually did a media analysis of the people who do most of the TV and radio interviews here, it's actually all our campaigners and activists who do that. We don't operate in a sort of centralised hierarchical thing. I mean, it's the reason why we have very low pay differentials here. We operate much more like a collective or a cooperative than that. I take certain legal responsibilities and I assess certain risk situations for the organisation, but apart from that, we work in project teams.
Yeah, well, that brings me on to the second point, which is I suppose the broader proposition here is that NGOs, and we completely understand that you're on the radical end of that, not least because of your pay differential and the range of different people that are presented to the media. However, the broader point we wish to make here, I guess, is that NGOs and the people that front those NGOs would be a lot more effective in presenting the extremity of the threat if they themselves engaged in high-profile civil disobedience actions. And to that extent, I'll go on to the second point, which you would like to your response to, if that's okay, is the new executive engages and leading members of Greenpeace engage in a national speaking tour to tell Greenpeace UK members and other environmentalists that the time is up for the present political and economic system, and we need to rebel against the government to create a carbon-free future. These leading members should encourage Greenpeace members to form affinity groups to engage in mass civil disobedience, joining with other movements and networks to bring down the government and replace it with a national citizens' assembly of ordinary people who, informed by science and a deliberative process, will decide on government policy.
Yeah, but I find this slightly contradiction because you're participating in an election system. So you're, in a way, endorsing and legitimising that system. And you're also meeting with government ministers, kind of endorsing and legitimising their position as
well,
government
then I
ministers.
respond to that in a minute, but I was wondering if you could make a response specifically to
Yeah,
this
I don't
proposal.
understand it.
No, but this what you just said doesn't directly relate to this. I'll answer it in a minute, but respond to that. But what I was wondering was, do you have a response to re-engineering, as you might say, Greenpeace towards a mass participation civil disobedience organisation where the leading members go to and have face-to-face meetings with members to inform them of the diet situation and take a proactive approach in organising them.
No, and I think we do that. I think that's what we were talking about before in terms of taking people on a journey and encourage them to get more actively involved, training them in NVDA and so on and so forth. So I think that is important.
Can I just ask a point of fact on that? That my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, is there's only several hundred people that are trained up in the Greenpeace organisation to do direct action. Is that right?
No, thousands of people have been trained up. I think if you said at any one point how many people could you get out to do, direct action on, I don't know, July the 1st or something, and take 3 days off work or something, maybe we could get several hundred people to agree to do that. But that's out of a pool of thousands.
Yeah, because when I saw you in January, I think this was one of the points you were making, rightly or wrongly, I don't know whether it's correct, that you weren't able to get Greenpeace members onto the street for various reasons, not least because you're not actually involved in doing mass trainings of Greenpeace members.
No, we do mass trainings, but I think but
you
again,
do mass trainings.
Yeah, but I think that
So how many people come to your training events?
we hold training events regularly all the time here and around the country, and we have people who are NVDA trainings. I think some of our trainers actually helped local XR groups as well. But I think that the issue that we talked about last time was at any particular point, how many could you get out? And of course that also depends on context. Like your rebellion, for example, is during the Easter holidays, so that makes it much easier. But if you did that during, say, a working week, then that may be, in terms of the numbers, that may be very different. When students aren't on holiday, when teachers aren't on holiday, when people have got time off work because it's Easter, or when you haven't got 2 bank holidays, so you've got 4 days when people aren't working anyway, or the majority of people aren't working. I mean, all of this is context in terms of how many people, and then it also depends on the kind of risk profile. It's and what the charges might be.
Sure.
So all of these things are, on a kind of scale, aren't they? Ascending or descending scale, however you want to look at it. And so if you say take, I don't know, like the 1,200 people arrested over the Easter Rebellion, I don't know how many people have been charged, maybe 70 people have been charged or something, and maybe, I don't know, a couple of dozen will go to court. I don't know what the statistics are, but it's some kind of sort of descending scale, when you get towards those kind of more hardcore charges and the people are up for more serious offences and so on and so forth. So, so that's what I'm saying. When we talk about numbers, there are different ways of interpreting numbers and what people are prepared to do and so on and so forth, and that is a journey that people go on. The first time people get arrested, they feel a bit scared and so on and so forth, and then after that, you kind of shrug your shoulders, prepared to do more. You understand the risks a bit better. You know what happens to you. You psychologically and mentally and so on, you're better prepared for it.
Yeah. Okay.
And so this is a process. I think sometimes this is talked about, Roger, in terms of this is just like some kind of factory or mass production system. But it's not like that. Everyone is an individual, and everybody makes individual decisions and has to think about this, in terms of their own personal situation, their family situation, and so on and so forth. And some of these decisions are difficult. I was once in a decision where both my wife and I were both arrested, and we both faced 2 to 3 years in prison. The charges were extremely serious because we shut down the atomic weapons establishment at Aldermaston, and we had a young baby at the time. So for us, this was a much tougher decision than, say, if you didn't have a young baby. So everyone has to assess these risks and be prepared to take risks according to what they are happy with.
Okay,
and,
that's
and,
all.
And I think the thing is, Roger, you know nothing about me. You know nothing about the risks I've taken, the number of times I've been arrested, the fact that I've been thrown out of Indonesia as a threat to national security, how many injunctions I've broken. You know nothing, but you're prepared to insult me continuously in the bullshit that you write here, I find it very offensive. You know, you've taken lots of risks in your life, you've been arrested and so on and so forth, so have I. But you know, I'm not on an ego trip about this. It's not, why is this like some kind of badge for, I've been arrested 6 times, you've only been arrested 4 times. Why? We've all risked things, Roger. I've risked things throughout my life as an activist since I was a teenager, for 40 years. Right? I've faced imprisonment, I've broken injunctions, I've been thrown out of countries as a national security threat. I've had many things thrown at me, in many contexts, in many parts of the world. So please, don't patronise me or say find a leader who will, you know, prepared to take risks. It's bullshit, Roger. It's insulting. It's demeaning. And I don't know why you do it. Because I'm not against you, I'm not against what you're doing, I'm not your enemy. But you treat me like I'm the CEO of a big oil corporation or some nasty imperialist government. It's not pleasant.
No, I totally accept that.
Well, why didn't you apologise for the way you treat me?
Well, I'd like to respond if that's okay.
No, why don't you apologise for the way you treat me? Because the thing is, this is every other person from Extinction Rebellion. I sit down and have a really friendly conversation with them. Great solidarity. We come away thinking we want to work with each other, that we respect each other. We think we could do a lot together. But don't insult me. And you can replace me. I'm happy. Find someone else to do my job. I don't care. But that doesn't solve your problem. It's not about leaders. It's about people. It's about the people who work here. It's about our supporters, our volunteers. You know, nobody forces anybody to do things. People do what they want to do, and they're encouraged always to take more risks, get more involved. That's what we're about.
Could I quickly respond to that, if that's okay? As far as I'm aware, I'm being perfectly friendly towards you now, and I'm not intending to insult you. I mean, if that's your interpretation, then obviously I accept and hear that. But my intention in being here is to make a proposition to you, and obviously we're in a free society. I can make propositions, and you can respond to them as you so wish. My orientation as a candidate in this election is to use that platform to highlight the extremity of the threat, which is only communicated to me through the science, and I believe that the science is an objective process. The Arctic is going to melt, and the next generation are going to die from starvation if there isn't extreme and rapid transformation of our society and economy.
But we all read the same science, Roger. We all understand the science of climate change and the extinction of species.
Yeah. So, as I hope you know, our interpretation of that scientific information is that there has to be massive changes, and there needs to be massive changes in all aspects of our society, not least in Greenpeace and the NGO sector broadly, which there's good evidence to show is now holding back that process through, as my colleague has indicated to you, through making the continued proposition to the general public that change can happen through methods that have been established not to bring about structural change, namely the sending emails and what have you. And as you know, in the last meeting, one of your colleagues did say that the strategy of Greenpeace is managed defeat. And
no, this is an absolute lie.
Well, he did use those words, did he not?
That is a complete distortion of what was said. The thing that was being discussed at the time, and you'd have to go back, but I don't know if there were minutes taken about it. I think there was a discussion, an intellectual discussion, not in terms of what Greenpeace's mission was, which was managed defeat, which was absurd. It was a discussion about, are we just now managing defeat, or are we actually changing the situation so that we don't end up just managing defeat? It would be absurd to say that that was our mission. I mean, that was just a stupid interpretation of that discussion.
The fact of the matter is, he said that Greenpeace was engaged in managed defeat. So, you can't deny that.
That is absolute.
Those are the words he used.
That is absolute nonsense.
Well, whether it's absolute
Roger.
nonsense or not, I'm just, as a point of fact, those two
Well,
words were used.
well, your point of fact is that that's your interpretation of what you remember, but I utterly dispute that. Utterly dispute that.
What, that he said that? Yeah. Okay.
Or that was the interpretation or context.
Which one? That he said it or he didn't say it?
No, because the context of which, if you said to somebody, "Are we just managing defeat, or are we actually changing the system?" you could take half the sentence and say, "You said managing defeat," but you forgot the other half of the sentence, which was a question: is it one or the other? Come on, Roger. This is a stupid argument about words.
Well, I'm absolutely clear that that was his intention, was to say that with what Greenpeace was engaged with was managed defeat, but we don't need to labour the point. That's your interpretation. So maybe on a more positive note, do you think that Greenpeace would be prepared to make what I would suggest to you is like a structural change? I mean, I totally hear that there is a continuum. However, there is such a thing as structural analysis, that can be sea changes in the way that organisations function, and there could be, for instance, as has been indicated in point 2, a sort of national campaign, as it were, of going to see Greenpeace members and engaging in mass trainings. I mean, you've just accepted that only 200 to 300 or a few hundred Greenpeace people could take civil disputes at the moment.
That's not what I said, is it? I said at any one point,
At
depending
one
on
point. Yeah, sorry, I said
context
that. Yeah.
or date,
Yeah.
which is probably the same for Extinction Rebellion. I imagine if you called a mass protest on at lunchtime on Christmas Day, you might only get a few hundred people as well. And that's what it's not. You're just misinterpreting what I'm saying, Roger.
Right,
But it's good to have the clarification now, so you're clarifying that point, which is helpful.
Which I made very clear to begin
Okay,
with.
so there's a
Well,
specific.
it's clear. It's clear to you, but obviously it wasn't clear to Roger, so that's why it's good to have the clarification.
So there is a specific proposition, and I think it's reasonably clear, which is that Greenpeace engages in the mass training with a view to thousands of people coming on the street. Obviously not tomorrow or in a month or two, but let's say for the sake of argument in October.
Yes, but that in October is the next rebellion of Extinction Rebellion.
No, it's going to be broader than that. So there's already.
Well, it might be. We don't know. You can't speak.
Well, there are already. Oh yes. So yes. So well.
Well, in so much.
No, but you
There are
just said
other
you're going to have an
organisations.
uprising in
There are
October.
other organisations that are already planning that. So there's a network called By 2020 We Rise. They're planning to do things in October and throughout.
But that
October.
involves Extinction Rebellion.
Extinction Rebellion is one of a whole number of organisations that's part of By 2020 We Rise. There's also the Youth Strikes for Climate and other organisations.
Yeah.
So it's quite likely. I mean, Extinction Rebellion hasn't made a definitive decision, as I understand it, at this point, about what's going to happen and when. But it's likely, given that the two key periods, as history shows, for successful initiatives of this kind are the spring and the autumn. It's likely that the next thing will be in the autumn, and it's likely that it will be October, given that other organisations are already moving in that direction, and Extinction Rebellion appears to be. So, given that, could there not be a bit,
How do you know we're not part of that?
I imagine you probably are. I would hope you're
Well,
part of
there's
it by 2020 We Rise.
We don't need to labour this point. It's just like a simple question. To what degree would Greenpeace as an organisation in the UK be prepared to undertake a mass training and mobilisation of Greenpeace members? To what extent? Is that like not at all, or possibly, or definitely, for instance?
No, well, as I said to you before, that's what we are doing, and we would absolutely encourage people to participate in direct action and at an increasing scale as well. And I think, as I said before, if that moment has come where people are more prepared to do that,
Taking in turns, whose phone's going to go off next?
then obviously, this becomes kind of quite important in terms of, what we will be planning and are planning. So I don't think we have any difference of opinion.
Maybe it's different.
Are you on the phone, or do you need a
No,
minute?
that's fine. It's not answering. So. Keep going.
Okay, so there's a last point which I'd like you to respond to, if that's okay. Greenpeace initiate with other environmental networks a series of open space meetings where environmentalists of all persuasions can come together to share their grief about the impending catastrophe we are now facing and jointly resolve to transform the movement to make it fit for purpose in the new emergency context.
Yeah. So I think that comes back to hi Rona, yeah. No, it's okay. Yeah, if you could, that would be good, because I've got a meeting in 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Cheers. Bye. Yeah, I mean, I think that comes back to the discussions that we are having, including with Extinction Rebellion, about that, and they're ongoing at the moment.
So that could well be a possibility, is that what you're saying, or you're not sure?
Yeah, we are discussing with Extinction Rebellion about that.
About that specific point, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, well, those are all the main questions. Thanks for your time. And
So just to pick up, what
there was
would
one or two.
what would specifically be your response to point 3.2, like this idea of a speaking tour and using that as a way of mobilising people? It's the sort of thing
Well,
we've
I
seen
think
that's
that
worked
is
with
the thing
Bernie
that we
Sanders'
need to,
campaign and other
again, it's something
initiatives.
that we're discussing with Extinction Rebellion at the moment about the what it's going to
Methods of
happen in the
mobilisation.
autumn,
Okay.
and we are involved in discussions about that.
So including, what's going to happen in the autumn, and then
Well,
building
what-
back from there, how we
exactly,
mobilise for it.
exactly,
Okay, brilliant.
yeah.
So it's kind of an openness to exploring ways of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think that's it. Just wanted to thank you for your time and, reiterate again that as far as we're concerned, or speaking personally, our main orientation here is about the extent of the emergency and the desire for structural change in all aspects of activism. And to that extent, that's why we're here to make these propositions to you today. And we do intend to do that in a respectful way, and if that's accepted, that's my apologies for that, but that's my intention, and I think that's the intention of my colleagues as well. We have got this letter which we'd like to hand out to people. I mean, we'll be outside today, and there is an invitation for people to come and have a picnic and drone session outside Heathrow, and we are going to be asking for Heathrow to close the day before the election, so that people
Day
can...
before the election.
So next Wednesday.
Are you going to ask for Heathrow to be closed on Wednesday?
We're going to ask, we've already made a public statement to ask for the Heathrow to be closed so that people can consider what's going to happen to the next generation.
But are you going to physically close Heathrow on Wednesday?
We're going to engage in a picnic and drone session outside Heathrow.
Picnic and drone session?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that as candidates or as Extinction Rebellion?
Candidates,
As
yeah.
candidates, yeah. And assorted other individuals
Okay.
that want to make a statement.
Fine.
Okay.
Okay, good.
So would that be okay to give this out to members of staff?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your openness.
I think
Pleasure.
you're fine.
I thought we could...
Bit embarrassing that we hadn't done our facts checked, wasn't it? Yeah. Do you know his salary?
No, it's on the website.
Yeah, you didn't check it out.
No. It's all right. It's
Is there
just
such
sending
a
a
thing
nice...
as, I thought you were a researcher.
Sounds good. We're going to do it at WWF when it was on 200,000 there.
Yeah.
That's the next one. Yeah, I mean, that's good, isn't it? It's like, yes, that was good. Involving staff, a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it after that was fuzzy, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite hard to pin him down. He was a bit defensive.
Step down. Well, obviously he took offence to that, but it's a free country. We can make a proposal. Was a little bit fuzzy on whether the leaders are going to go and get arrested, and the leading members. I thought that was a little bit fuzzy as well, because obviously they do have leading people. But fair point that he's not the only representative, so that's a plus point. The minus point was,
Well, he emphasised that he has been arrested, and so what I took from that, and he did specifically say the only reason he didn't get arrested in April was because of his health condition. Mm-hmm. So that suggests he's willing to be arrested.
So that's good.
So I think there's a lot to build, a lot of potential, a lot to build on there potentially. And I just think, even the fact that he was saying that I mean, their perspective, I think, is, you know, they're the good guys. You've come in too heavy. You're actually making it worse, which is obviously what, you know, some of the people are saying. But I'm slightly. This is the first I've really engaged with this, and I just see that actually, as counterintuitive as it seems, disruption works. That's how come we're here. That's what we've achieved. That's how we got all of these historical wins. You know, with the segregation, etc. So I see him shifting. Like he's there emphasising the fact that he's arrestable
Absolutely.
now because of this. So I think it's important that we really do emphasise keeping it respectful and polite, but also keep the pressure on. Because I just think it's
Yes, and I think that's
routine,
why
isn't
the
it?
second point is really the heart of what we're asking, which is, I mean, I think he was a bit disingenuous saying that, you know, it's a continuum and
Yes,
you can, you know, it's up to the individual. Well, that's really not appropriate comment because, you know, organisations have structural approaches, and there's no question that they could mobilise thousands of people if they engaged in a thoroughly, properly, you know, I was just saying before, like, it was 5 staff, you know, £100,000 budget for the sake of argument, and, you know, a 4-month programme of mass meetings around the country where him and leading figures stood up and said, look, we've got this major problem, whatever we've done in the past, you know, loads of people have done things that haven't been appropriate, that's not the issue. The issue is the future, and now Greenpeace is changing, and we're asking members to step up. We'll be stepping up as leading members of Greenpeace. We intend to get arrested in October. We're asking you to join us, join other movements. I don't think that's like unclear, and it's definitely a structural change. And I think that should be the major like request of Greenpeace from, you know, Extinction Rebellion and other allied organisations.
I agree, and I think that hopefully our meeting today can be the basis of that going forward. I think you know, I think really there's a like there was a bit of the disingenuous bit was a bit of that hand wringing, going, well, you know, we can't guarantee how many people we might get, and it's like, look, the youth strike didn't exist a year ago. Extinction Rebellion didn't exist a year ago. In the last year, they've mobilised thousands of people to take civil disobedience. If they can do it from a start of zero, you know, then Greenpeace, what can Greenpeace achieve? And even if it's, you know, just saying, well, even if it's 1,000 people trained up and arrestable in October, that's a great contribution.
It'd be a fantastic contribution.
So they don't have to sort of kind of go, oh, we can't do 10,000, so we can't guarantee 10,000, so let's not try.
No.
It's like, let's just try. We won't criticise you for trying and getting it wrong.
No, absolutely not.
Our concern is that we don't all step up as fully as we
and
can.
stepping up has to have a concrete, practical policy basis, which is people doing it full time, properly budgeted, is face-to-face meetings around the country, mass trainings, and the leadership of Greenpeace commit themselves to putting themselves into harm's way, as it were, in October, you know, to be arrested. And again, if they don't end up getting arrested, that's fine. But it's basically like making clear that we're in a new era of emergency, isn't it? And the old times of sitting behind desks or whatever are over. And, you know, granted, he's done great things in the past. I mean, lots of people have done great things. Lots of people have done really not so great things. That's not the issue, is it? You know, we're not making any big judgment of Greenpeace. We're looking at policies, actions, you know, and framings. Those are the things which need to happen from now on. And then the last one is a series of open space meetings so people can come together and share their grief about impending catastrophe. Well, you seem to be warming to that idea.
Yeah, I think.
And I think that could be a game changer as well, couldn't it?
I think those last two, he was sort of saying up for grabs, basically.
For grabs,
yeah.
Right. So, you know, and again, that seems like a human and connective thing to me, you know, because as you know, as I look upon it, this is not about him as an individual. It's not about Greenpeace. It's not a personal thing. It's about people coming together, you know, sharing their grief and their emotion around it, and then resolving to take action. It's not about individuals. And if you can't do that, then obviously, you know, my proposition is just the honourable thing and allow someone else to take that position.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, my farming business is being destroyed. My kids stand to die. My society stands to be destroyed. I am proposing, along with a lot of other people, obviously, there's a rapid escalation in full-scale civil disobedience. And if there's an institution that's holding that back, sending emails out saying all you need to do is sign a petition, then they are objectively holding that process up. And they are therefore, it's justifiable to raise that issue with them and to engage in respectful civil disobedience.
I'm pretty.
How you want to, as everyone knows, when you challenge people, then they will use all sorts of guilt trips and projections, and that might or might not be right. But I've been consistent all the time that I have nothing against anyone as an individual, and neither have people that have been engaged in this activism. We've said it's not about individual, judgment. It's not about naming and shaming. It's not about saying we're great. It's about action. It's about what action's being taken and what action's necessary to save the young people. And it's not a surprise, is it, that you get defensive reactions? But as we all know, defensive reactions are part of social change and part of personal change. You said some unpleasant things to me, I'd be defensive, but it doesn't mean you're not right. Probably are right. It's part of the process of change, as of course Greenpeace well know, because they go and upset people all the time. They've got that thing about plastics, Sainsbury's, we couldn't care less. Well, that's quite a sort of aggressive messaging. So, and fair dues. I'm sure Sainsbury's don't care less about plastic, or maybe they don't. But this is politics, it's democratic society. Everyone's allowed to have their say. Period.